You were told this remote homestead was empty, but the rhythmic breathing coming from behind that padlocked cellar door says otherwise. As you step across the rotting floorboards, you realize the wet, dragging footsteps echoing through the hallway aren't yours. These 3 properties were sold as vacant, but someone or something never actually left. My name is Brantley Thorne. I'm a rural property appraiser out of Lowndes County, Mississippi, and I've walked through more abandoned farmhouses than I care to count, documenting water damage and termite trails for bank foreclosures. So the old Bixby place on County Road 19 didn't even make me blink when I pulled up that first afternoon. It was a sagging 2-story Victorian with peeling white paint and a wraparound porch half swallowed by kudzu. Listed as completely vacant since 2018, after the last owner passed without heirs. And the realtor handed me the key with a shrug and said, "Nobody's been inside in 6 years." I let myself in around 4 o'clock. The October light already thinning to a buttery slant through filthy windows, and the interior was exactly what you'd expect. Dollies of mouse droppings, collapsed settee, wallpaper hanging in tongues, but the air downstairs held a strange, damp warmth, like a mouth that had just exhaled. And I caught the faint temps of something organic and sweet that made me think of a funeral home's back room. I did my measurements, noted the water-stained ceiling in the parlor, was about to head upstairs when I noticed a door beneath the staircase that I had missed on my first sweep. A low, arched thing painted the same gray as the wall, fitted with a heavy iron hasp and a padlock that looked brand new, shiny and out of place against the rot. I knelt and tugged the lock. Solid, no key left behind. And I pressed my ear to the door more out of habit than suspicion, and that's when I heard it, a long, slow, rhythmic pull of air, in and out. As steady as a sleeping animal's sides, but wetter. With a faint gurgle at the end of each exhale that raised every fine hair on my neck because it sounded nothing like wind through a cracked foundation. It sounded like a chest filling and emptying deliberately, patiently, waiting for me to do something. I told myself it was a backed-up vent or a trapped raccoon with a respiratory infection, but I couldn't make my feet move toward the front door. I just crouched there, timing my own breath against the thing behind the wood. And after maybe 30 seconds, I realized with a sick, plunging lurch that the breathing was matching mine, shortening when I shortened, pausing when I held. And when I deliberately breathed shallow, the answering inhale dragged thin and reedy like it was mimicking me from inside a pillow. I scrambled back, hit the floorboards. And that's when I saw what the dim light hadn't shown earlier, a trail of glistening. Palm-sized indentations in the dust leading from the staircase all the way to the padlocked door. As if someone had crawled on all fours with soaking wet hands and knees and stopped right at the threshold. And the prints were still beaded with moisture that hadn't yet dried, which meant they were fresh, impossibly fresh, made within the last few minutes while I'd been standing in the parlor. I did the only thing my panicked brain would allow. I grabbed a rusted crowbar from a pile of junk near the fireplace, snapped the padlock hasp with one desperate heave, and yanked the cellar door open onto a black stairwell that exhaled a wave of air so warm and sweetly rotten it made my eyes water. And from the darkness below, I heard my own breathing coming back at me. Recorded and warped, layered over a deep, liquid chuckle that didn't use a throat. I slammed the door, piled a broken dresser against it, and drove back to town with my hands shaking so badly I could barely steer. The property remains on the market, and the listing still says vacant, but I check it every month on the county website, and the photos have started to change. The cellar door is open now in the most recent set, and in the corner of the frame, just visible, something white and vaguely hand-shaped is gripping the edge of the top step. I'm Eulalie Jessup. I inherited my Aunt Vertie's place outside Hinton, West Virginia, in the fall of 2026. A little white clapboard farmhouse tucked into a holler so narrow the sun only hit the front porch between 11 and 1. And everyone in town called it the empty homestead because after Vertie went to the nursing home in 2020, the house sat locked and dormant. Visited only by a neighbor who mowed the weeds twice a summer, so I figured it'd be a peaceful place to fix up and sell. The first 3 nights passed without incident. Just the usual creaks of old timber settling. But on the 4th night I woke at exactly 3:15 a.m. to a sound that yanked me upright in bed like a fish on a line. Heavy, wet, dragging footsteps crossing the upstairs landing directly above my ceiling. Each step a distinct squelch and a heavy thump, like someone was walking in soaked boots made of raw meat. I sat rigid, listening to the steps travel from the top of the stairs to the door of the linen closet and back again, over and over. A regular circuit with the same awful rhythm, and I could map it perfectly. Squelch thump, pause at the closet, turn. Squelch thump back to the stairs, pause, repeat. Crept up the stairwell with my flashlight shaking a cone of white light onto the landing, and the footsteps stopped the instant my foot touched the top step, leaving nothing but a heavy silence and a smell I recognized from childhood visits, not Vertie's rose sachet, but a cold mineral odor, like water from a deep limestone cave, and beneath it, the faint copper tinge of blood. The landing carpet, an old floral runner that had been clean and dry when I had vacuumed that afternoon, was now soaked with a dark, spreading stain that glistened in the flashlight beam. And the wet trail led straight to the linen closet's door, which I noticed for the first time wasn't just closed, it was nailed shut. 5 heavy framing nails driven through the door frame into the jamb from the outside. The heads of the nails rusty, but the splintered wood around them looking disturbingly fresh, as if they'd been hammered in recently by someone standing right where I stood. I should have gone back downstairs, but something in me had to know, so I pressed my palm flat against the closet door, and the wood was warm, not cold, pulsing faintly with a heat that felt exactly like skin. And through the door I heard a sound that paralyzed me. A whisper, low and crackling. Ackley. That said my name in my Aunt Vertie's voice, the same sweet, slightly quavering tone she'd used when she made me cornbread. Except now the voice was wrong, stretched too thin, and after Eulalie, it kept going, repeating my name but adding a wet, clattering sound like dentures clicking, Eulalie, until it dissolved into a gurgle. I backed away and, against every instinct, looked down at the base of the door and saw a small crack where the wood had warped. And through that crack something was looking back at Manat and I. Exactly, but a glossy, dark protuberance that blinked horizontally in a slow, deliberate slide. And a black fluid oozed from it down the door panel, forming a long, searching tendril that began to probe at the nails as if it were unscrewing them from the inside. I fled to my car and spent the night at a motel. And when I came back with the sheriff the next morning, the house was bone dry, the closet door still nailed shut.
Oh, ain't no wet footprints anywhere, but the closet door had a new addition written in the same black,
glistening fluid I'd seen the night before in a looping cursive that matched my dead aunt's handwriting perfectly. The words "Let me show you the cellar, darling," were scrawled from the crack down to the floor. The padlocked cellar door and the kitchen door I had never once mentioned to anyone was standing wide open onto a darkness that breathed. Hollis Rayburn here. I run a handyman service out of Altus, Oklahoma. and in late September of 2026, I was hired to do a pre-sale clean-out of the Gunderson property, a remote stone farmhouse on the edge of the Quartz Mountains that had been empty for a decade after the Gundersons. Son walked into the prairie and was never found, leaving the place to the bank, and the realtor told me, "It's just a dusty shell. Nothing in there but spiders and a few broken chairs." I got there at dusk. The sky, that deep bruised purple you only get on the plains. And the house was massive for a farmstead. 2 stories of dark field stone with a slate roof that sagged in the middle like a tired spine. And every window was black and still. But when I killed the truck engine, I thought I heard a single piano note from somewhere deep inside. A low, mournful G that hung in the air a beat too long and then stopped, not fading but cut off. I chalked it up to a bird or a loose shutter, let myself in through the front door with the lockbox key, and clicked on my heavy-duty flashlight to a scene of absolute neglect. Plaster on the floor, staircase with missing balusters, and a smell that wasn't just mouse and mildew but something alive, a greasy, warm smell like an unwashed scalp. I moved room to room, making notes for the dumpster, and in the back hallway I found a door that was different from the others. Thick oak, reinforced with iron straps, and secured by a huge brass padlock that had been installed on my side of the door, as if someone had locked something in the hallway rather than in the room beyond. The metal was ice cold, despite the lingering warmth of the day, and when I leaned close, I heard a steady, muffled rhythm from behind it, not breathing exactly, more like a soft, wet scraping, something dragging itself back and forth across the floor on the other side, with a patient, endless repetition that made my own joints ache in sympathy. I should have left, but I'm the kind of fool who needs to see. So I wedged a crowbar into the hasp, and after a struggle that left me sweating, the lock popped, and the door swung inward onto a narrow cellar stair that descended into what my flashlight revealed as a single room with a dirt floor, stone walls sweating moisture, and in the exact center, standing alone beneath a bare bulb that flickered on when I stepped down, a tall wooden wardrobe with 2 mirrored doors, its surface entirely covered in a thick black tar-like substance that dripped slowly and pulsed in the light. The wardrobe had been nailed shut. From the inside I could see the heads of the nails protruding outward through the wood. Their tips, bent and shiny on the doors, bulged slightly with each wet scraping sound, as if something inside was pressing its full weight against them before sliding back to do it again. I stood transfixed, and as I watched, the mirrored doors began to fog from the inside, condensation forming in the shape of a handprint that smeared downward, and a voice perfectly clear and calm said my full name, Hollis Rayburn, from inside the wardrobe. But it was my mother's voice, a voice I hadn't heard since she died of cancer in 2019, and it said, "Baby, I'm so cold in here. Open the door and let me warm my hands." I knew it wasn't her. I knew it with every fiber of my being, but my hand moved on its own toward that dripping wood. I only snapped out of it when my flashlight beam caught the floor. I saw what the wardrobe was sitting on, a ring of small, wet, barefoot prints that circled the wardrobe and then led toward the stairs, stopping precisely behind where I was standing, as if something had gotten out, walked up behind me, and was now breathing softly on the back of my neck. I didn't turn around. I bolted up the stairs, slammed the hallway door, and drove away so fast my tools scattered in the bed of the truck. And when I called the realtor the next day to quit the job, she said, "What's strange is, we've had 3 other handymen say the same thing about that hallway, but when we sent a crew to check, the wardrobe was gone, and there was nothing but a clean dirt floor and a single child's shoe in the corner." I still have that crowbar. Sometimes when I touch the cold iron at night, I hear my mother's voice, still asking to be let out of something I will never ever open again. If these tales have left you checking the closets and straining to hear breathing behind locked doors, you're not alone. These homes sit on the market still, technically empty, but holding something that refuses to be erased. We've shared just 3 accounts. But there are countless more properties where the sale sign says vacant, while the floorboards groan with a presence that never signed the deed. I'm your narrator from True Terror Files Official, and your stories fuel our late nights of research. Please share your own experiences in the comments. Maybe you've heard wet footsteps in a house you thought was empty, and hit subscribe because we're heading deeper into the dark corners of rural America. Stay watchful, and remember, never open a nailed shut door at 3 a.m., and never walk into a vacant house without listening first.